Between 1942 and 1943, Stalingrad claimed over 2 million casualties in one of history's bloodiest battles. The battle has become famous amongst modern audiences due to Soviet marksmen like Vasily Zaitsev, who turned the rubble into a hunting ground, stalking German troops. German snipers responded in kind, creating standoffs that became stories of endurance and nerve. But what if, into this nightmare, a different kind of sniper arrived? Not one using bolt-action rifles, but with weapons of the 21st century. What if a modern US Navy SEAL sniper team had appeared on the German side at Stalingrad? For this counterfactual scenario, let's establish some ground rules. We will assume the two-man SEAL sniper team, a shooter and a spotter, is deployed with their modern weapons and training intact. They are operating under German command, but with their own small supply chain. Ammunition, batteries, and fuel for their optics and equipment are soon to be available. To keep this scenario plausible, we'll place them in a secure German-held sector of the city, a base of operations from which they can use to move into sniper hides. They would also require a secure base of operations. In this counterfactual, we can imagine that they're embedded within the German lines, occupying a defensible ruin on the western bank of the Volga, close enough to influence the fighting, but with relative cover from Soviet artillery. Their position would need regular resupply, not just for ammunition, but for food, batteries, and drone maintenance. In reality, such supply lines would be precarious under constant Soviet pressure. But for our what-if scenario, we grant that the Wehrmacht provides the essentials to keep the team operational. Without this assumption, the team would be crippled by logistics almost immediately. The fuel for their night vision, the batteries for their laser rangefinders, the specialist ammunition, none of it existed in 1942. For the sake of this experiment, the obstacle of logistics is removed. So, how would such a team impact the Battle of Stalingrad? Sniper duels in the Second World War typically took place at ranges of 200 to 600 meters. Iron sights or basic scopes made precision difficult. A single kill might take hours of patience and positioning. A SEAL sniper team carries rifles like the Barrett M107 50 caliber, capable of reaching targets over a mile away whilst being able to punch through hard cover at the same time. Their suppressed M110 rifles allow for silent engagements at medium range, while thermal scopes can spot a human body in total darkness. To the German commanders, such a team would appear almost supernatural. Soviet officers, artillery observers, and even snipers themselves could be eliminated at ranges where no return fire was possible. Entire Soviet assault groups could be pinned down by a single pair of unseen shooters. Psychologically, the impact would be severe. Soviet troops were already haunted by the fear of hidden snipers. With thermal optics and suppressed rifles, the SEALs would become something of a boogeyman for the ruined city. Each day, officers would fall, supply runners would vanish, and morale would plummet. Tactically, the effect would be greatest in controlling movement. In Stalingrad, crossing open streets was often a death sentence. With modern rifles, the danger would extend far beyond the range of weapons of the period. Soviet attempts to reinforce positions or bring supplies across exposed ground would be punished. The SEALs' spotting gear, from laser rangefinders to compact drones, would also change the dynamic. They could call German artillery more accurately on Soviet staging points on the Volga River, identify strong points, and coordinate ambushes. For Wehrmacht units fighting block to block, such intelligence could save hundreds of lives. This intelligence gathering aspect would likely be in which they are most valuable. Furthermore, at night, when much of Stalingrad's fighting intensified, the advantage would be overwhelming. The Luftwaffe's bombing had left the city unlit, and both sides relied on flares or blind fire in the darkness. With night vision and thermal equipment, the SEALs could operate as if they were in daylight, striking targets with impunity, with the Soviets being unable to counter this nighttime advantage. On the battlefield level, the SEALs would tilt the balance. A handful of critical Soviet commanders might be killed. Zaitsev himself, the Soviet Union's most famous sniper, would likely have become a target of the SEAL team for the morale damage this would cause. Supply runs across the Volga might be slowed. German morale would rise, knowing they had this elite team on their side. Yet, the limitations are clear. Stalingrad was not won or lost by snipers, but by armies. By factories in the Urals producing tanks and rifles, by Soviet willingness to pour men into the city, and by Hitler's refusal to retreat. A two-man sniper team cannot stop frostbite, starvation, or the encirclement of the German 6th Army. What they could do is delay. Perhaps Soviet progress slows. Perhaps Paulus's army holds a little longer. the Red Army might need weeks more to secure the city. This could have knock-on effects, delaying Operation Uranus, pushing back the timetable of Soviet offensives into 1943. For the Germans, this would be valuable. For the Soviets, it would be an irritation, but not the decisive change the Germans would need to alter the war. The greater consequence may lie not in the battle itself, but in the lessons learned from it. Both the Germans and Soviets invested heavily in sniper and small unit tactics after Stalingrad, producing manuals and schools dedicated to sharpshooting. The appearance of a modern team would accelerate that process dramatically. German engineers, seeing a Barrett rifle or a thermal scope, might attempt to replicate them. Soviet commanders facing an enemy who seemed to see in the dark might devote greater effort to counter-sniping technology. The arms race in optics and small arms could be pushed forward by decades. Despite this arms race, the industrial base of 1942 could not mass-produce night vision or high-caliber semi-automatic rifles. The concepts might be recorded, but the technology would remain unobtainable on a large scale. In the end, the SEAL team's fate would be sealed by numbers. Even the most advanced weapons cannot hold a city alone. When the Soviet counteroffensive encircled the 6th Army, Paulus's men were starved and frozen, their supply lines cut. Our hypothetical SEAL team would be trapped alongside them. They might continue to fight, delivering hit-and-run tactics or guerrilla warfare-style raids, but eventually, surrounded, they would face the same fate as the rest of the German 6th Army. So, what if the US Navy SEAL sniper team had fought at Stalingrad on the side of the Germans? In the short term, they would have been devastating. Soviet officers and snipers hunted at ranges beyond comprehension, movements paralyzed by fear. And German morale buoyed by the presence of seemingly supernatural allies. They might have delayed the Soviet victory, buying the Germans time at an immense cost in lives. But in the long run, Stalingrad was not won by a handful of rifles, but by the industrial power of nations, by logistics, and by sheer human endurance. The SEALs would leave their mark, but not a changed ending. Stalingrad would still fall. The Red Army would still advance west. The war would still end in Berlin. What their presence reveals is not an alternate victory, but the limits of technology when measured against the vast scale of total war. If you enjoyed this video, or it made you think more than you thought you might, please consider subscribing. It really helps out.